When we think about finding a cure for a disease like ALS, our minds usually jump to some brand new discovery in a lab. But what if a crucial treatment wasn't a new molecule at all? What if it's a drug that's already out there, just kind of hiding in plain sight on our pharmacy shelves? Today we're going to dive into this really powerful and practical idea, drug repurposing.
10 to 15 years. I want you to just think about that number for a second. That's the typical, painstaking timeline it takes to develop a brand new drug from square one. For patients and families who are facing a progressive disease, that is an absolute eternity. It's an incredibly long and expensive road.
So that brings us to the most important question, right? For a disease like ALS, where time is literally the most precious resource there is, a 15-year wait is just agonizing. So is there a shortcut? Is there a faster, more practical way to find treatments that can actually help people now?
And that's where this powerful idea of a shortcut comes in. The concept isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about looking at the wheels we already have and figuring out if they can be used in a new, maybe even life-changing way. What if a potential therapy for ALS is a drug that's already approved for something totally different?
Well, this strategy actually has a name: drug repurposing. And it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You take drugs that have already been developed and tested for other conditions, I'm talking about things like diabetes, asthma, even bipolar disorder, and you systematically investigate if they can be given a brand new job, fighting ALS.
So why is this such a game changer? Well, it really boils down to 4 key things. The biggest one, for sure, is safety. With these drugs, we often have years, sometimes decades, of data on how they act in the human body. This lets researchers basically leapfrog over the earliest, most time-consuming parts of clinical trials. It's cheaper, it's faster, and it's all possible because of this fascinating idea called biological overlap. The idea is that a lot of different diseases are actually connected by the same underlying problems, like inflammation or stress on our cells. So a drug that calms down inflammation in asthma might just be able to do the same for the neuroinflammation we see in ALS.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. Drug repurposing has a real, tangible history in ALS research. And it's a story that's full of incredible hope, some really hard-earned lessons, and thankfully, some genuine progress. So let's see what this looks like in the real world.
All right, our first stop is a cautionary tale, and it's with a drug you've probably heard of, lithium. For decades, it's been a go-to treatment for bipolar disorder. But about 15 years ago, it suddenly became one of the most talked-about drugs in the entire ALS community.
What happened here is, well, it's a classic story in science. Back in 2008, a tiny study came out with results that seemed almost too good to be true. It created this huge tidal wave of excitement. But science has to be rigorous, and when bigger, better-controlled studies were launched to double-check the findings, the effect just vanished. Lithium didn't work for ALS. It was a huge disappointment, for sure, but it taught the field an invaluable lesson about the danger of false hope and why large, rigorous trials are absolutely essential.
But that's not the end of the road. Far from it. Now let's look at a much more recent and much more complex example, a therapy known as AMX0035. This wasn't about repurposing just one drug, but about combining 2 known compounds to see if they could do something new together. And this is really clever, because it shows a much more sophisticated way of thinking. The scientists behind this therapy figured that motor neurons in ALS were getting hit from 2 sides. 1, stress in the cell's protein folding factory, and 2, stress in the cell's power plants, the mitochondria. So they combined 2 existing compounds, each designed to protect one of those specific spots. It's like a coordinated, 2-pronged attack to try and keep the neuron alive. So what happened? Well, the results were really compelling. The main trial suggested it slowed down the loss of function, and later analyses hinted that it might even help people live longer. This was big enough that it got approved in some countries. But, and this is a big but, there was a catch. A lot of debate started up in the scientific community about just how strong the evidence really was, and that's prompted even more trials to get a final answer. It just goes to show you that even a success story in repurposing can be pretty complex. And the search goes way beyond just these 2 examples. Researchers are constantly scanning, the entire global pharmacy, looking for other drugs that might hit the biology of ALS in just the right way.
Just check out these 2. On the surface, they seem totally unrelated to ALS. Ibuprofene, a drug for asthma. It's being studied to see if it can calm down neuroinflammation in the brain and spinal cord. And metformin, one of the most common diabetes drugs on the planet, is being tested to see if it can help fix energy problems inside the motor neurons. It's a perfect example of looking at diseases not just by their name, but by the broken systems they have in common.
All of this, it brings us to a really critical realization in modern ALS research. The idea of finding a single silver bullet, just one drug that can stop this disease cold, is looking less and less likely. And the reason for that is the disease itself.
It's because ALS isn't just one thing going wrong. It's more like a cascade of system failures all happening at once. You've got breakdowns in how proteins are managed, how the cell produces energy, how genetic instructions are handled. The list goes on. A single drug that only targets one of those problems probably isn't going to be enough to stop the whole domino effect.
So what do? Well, the entire field is starting to move toward an approach that's worked for other really complex diseases like cancer or HIV. The future is probably in cocktails, combination therapies, where multiple drugs, including some repurposed ones, all work together to attack the disease from different angles at the very same time.
Okay, but let's be realistic. This whole strategy isn't easy. There are some major hurdles. It's kind of a strange paradox, right? The very thing that makes this approach so attractive, using cheap, generic drugs, also makes it hard to fund. There's often not a big financial incentive for companies to run huge, expensive trials on drugs that don't have patent protection. And on top of that, you've got the biological puzzles. A drug might only work for a small group of patients, and finding the right dose can be a whole new challenge. And of course, you can never forget the lesson of lithium. You're always running the risk of chasing a false signal.
But even with all those challenges, repurposing is still a strategy that's fueled by this incredible sense of hope, urgency, and persistence. It really represents a commitment to using every single tool we have in the toolbox to fight ALS.
There's a quote that just nails this whole idea perfectly. Repurposed drugs represent knowledge already gained. It's about not having to start from zero. It's about standing on the shoulders of decades of previous research and finding brilliant new ways to apply all that wisdom.
And that's a perfect way to think about it. These drugs can serve as a bridge. They might be able to offer real, meaningful benefits to people today, maybe slowing the disease down and improving their quality of life, all while the longer, more complex work of developing revolutionary new things like gene therapies continues in the background.
And this is really what science is all about, right? It's this cycle of progress. You test an idea, you learn from your successes, but just as importantly, you learn from your failures. A failure like the lithium trial helps you design better trials in the future. A complex success like AMX-035 points you toward new biological targets to go after. Every single step, whether it feels like it's forward or backward, builds momentum for the whole field.
And it's so important to remember, this is one piece of a much larger puzzle. Drug repurposing isn't the only strategy, but it is an essential one. It's working alongside all this cutting-edge research in genetics, stem cells, and other advanced medicines to create a big, comprehensive, multi-front attack on ALS.
So if there's one word to take away from all this, it's momentum. In a fight where every single day matters so much, the ability to shorten timelines, to build on knowledge we already have, that isn't just a scientific advantage. It is a profound source of hope, and it can make all the difference.
And that leaves us with one final and really powerful question to think about. With thousands of approved drugs out there on the market, each with its own unique biological effect, could the next big step forward for ALS not be in some futuristic lab, but already be waiting for us right now at the local pharmacy, just hiding in plain sight?